The
Please, my
snow
boy's
came
burning
early
with
that
fever.
October morning in
Take what you
1873,
need,
falling
then we'll
like
talk about
ash from
payment.
a burning sky over the Kansas prairie. Samuel McKenna stood at the edge of his property line, watching the white veil descend upon land that had seen too much blood, too much sorrow. His weathered hands gripped the Winchester rifle not from threat, but from habit, a soldier's instinct that never truly died, even 3 years after Appomattox. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges, creaking in the wind like bones grinding against each other. Sam had meant to fix it for months, but somehow the days kept slipping past, each one blending into the next in a haze of whiskey and nightmares. The war had ended, they said, but for men like Sam, the war never really stopped. It just changed battlefields, moving from blood-soaked fields to the darker territories of the mind. That's when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the morning symphony of prairie life. Not the low of cattle or the whistle of wind through cottonwood trees. This was different, deliberate, the careful clink of glass against glass coming from his medical supply shed. Sam moved with the silent precision of a man who'd learned to hunt humans before he'd ever hunted game. His boots found the quiet spots between frost-brittle grass, his breathing shallow and controlled. The shed door was ajar, just enough for a thin body to slip through. Inside, shadows moved with desperate purpose. He raised the rifle finger, resting light on the trigger. Step out slow, hands where I can see them. The movement stopped. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then a woman emerged, and Sam's world tilted on its axis. She was thin as winter branches, her dress more patches than original fabric, but she held herself with a dignity that poverty couldn't break. Her arms cradled glass bottles, laudanum, morphine, precious medical supplies he'd hoarded from his army days. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold, gray-green like storm clouds over wheat fields, and filled with a desperate determination he recognized. The look of someone fighting a war they couldn't afford to lose. "Please," she said, her voice steady despite the rifle aimed at her chest. "My boy's dying. The fever's got him bad. I know what these are. I know how to use them." "Those medicines aren't for stealing," Sam said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Nothing's for stealing when you've got choices," she replied. "When you don't, everything's for surviving." She shifted the bottles in her arms, and that's when Sam saw it, the way she protected them with her body ready to take a bullet before she'd let them break. But more than that, he saw the practiced way she held them, the knowledge in her grip. This wasn't some desperate mother grabbing at random hopes. This woman knew medicine. "You, a nurse." The question came out rougher than intended. Something flickered across her face. Pride, pain, memory. "I was. During the war. Field Hospital, Gettysburg, mostly. After Tennessee." Sam's rifle lowered an inch, then another. Gettysburg. The word echoed in his mind like distant cannon fire. The blood, the screaming, the endless rows of dying boys calling for their mothers. And through it all, the nurses' angels in blood-stained aprons fighting their own war against death itself. "What's your name?" "Clara Bennett." She lifted her chin. "My husband was Dr. James Bennett, 43rd Pennsylvania. He died last year. Consumption took him, though it was really the war that killed him. Just took its time about it." Sam studied her face, searching for something he couldn't name. There was something familiar about the way she stood, the tilt of her head, the steady hands despite the circumstances, like an echo of a dream he couldn't quite catch. "Your boy," he said finally. "How old?" "5. His name's Thomas. His sister Rose is with him. She's 7, trying to play mother boiling water like I taught her, but—" Clara's voice cracked for the first time. "He's burning up. Has been for 2 days. I've tried everything, willow bark, cold baths, every remedy I know. Nothing's breaking it." Sam lowered the rifle completely. "Where?" "About a mile west. There's an abandoned dugout by Cooper's Creek. We've been there 3 weeks. In that flood-damaged hole, Christ woman, that place isn't fit for animals." "It was what we could afford," Clara said simply. Which was nothing. Sam made a decision that would change everything, though he didn't know it yet. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the shed. "Take what you need." Clara's eyes widened. I can pay you back. Somehow. I can work. You can save your boy first. Then we'll talk about payment." He pulled a leather satchel from a hook on the wall. "Fill this. Take the laudanum, the morphine, and there's quinine in the back. Real quinine, not the synthetic stuff they're peddling in town." As Clara carefully packed the medicines, her movements precise and knowledgeable, Sam found himself really looking at her. Not just the poverty, not just the desperation, but the woman underneath. The way her fingers knew exactly how to cushion glass against glass. The way she automatically checked each bottle's seal. The competence that transcended her current circumstances. "You'll need clean water," he said. "Boiled for at least 10 minutes. And the dosage for a 5-year-old. 2 grains of quinine every 4 hours, laudanum only if the pain becomes unbearable. No more than 3 drops in water." Clara interrupted, then caught herself. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to—" "No." Sam's voice was strange, distant. "That's right. That's exactly right." Their eyes met across the small shed, and something passed between them. Not recognition exactly, but something deeper, like 2 broken pieces discovering they were from the same shattered whole. "I'll come with you," Sam heard himself say. "Check on the boy." "You don't need to." "I know what I need to do, Mrs. Bennett." He grabbed his medical kit, the one he hadn't opened in 6 months. "I was a field surgeon, 63rd New York, and that dugout's no place for a sick child. After we stabilize him, you're all coming back here." "We couldn't impose. It's not an imposition. It's a debt." Clara frowned. "I don't understand. You don't know us." Sam looked out at the falling snow, seeing other snow, other fields, other times when the world had been ending, and somehow angels had appeared to hold it together with nothing but determination and cloth bandages. "Maybe not," he said quietly, "but I knew others like you. Women who walked through hell to save boys they'd never meet again. Consider this a payment on account." As they prepared to leave, Sam noticed Clara pause at the doorway, her hand reaching out to steady herself against the frame. For just a moment her strength wavered, showing the exhaustion beneath. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked. "That's not important right now." "It is if you collapse before we reach your children." He handed her a piece of hardtack from his pocket soldier's food, tasteless but sustaining. She took it without false pride, understanding that survival sometimes meant accepting help. As they walked toward the horses, the snow began falling heavier, covering their tracks almost as soon as they made them. Sam couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking toward something inevitable, something that had been set in motion long before this morning, perhaps on a battlefield, where a young nurse had moved through the carnage, saving lives with steady hands and fierce determination. The prairie stretched out before them, white and endless, full of promise and peril in equal measure. And somewhere in that vastness, a small boy fought for his life, waiting for his mother to return, with salvation stolen from a stranger's shed, a stranger who was beginning to understand that some thefts were really gifts in disguise, and some debts could only be paid with the currency of the heart. The Kansas Territory in 1873 was a land caught between worlds, no longer frontier, but not yet civilized, where the scars of war met the promises of westward expansion. The railroad had punched through 2 years prior, bringing with it dreamers and drifters, opportunists, and the lost souls of a nation trying to forget its bloodiest conflict. But the land itself remained unforgiving, a sprawling canvas of prairie grass and hidden valleys where a person could disappear entirely, either by choice or by circumstance. Samuel McKenna had chosen to disappear. His ranch sat 15 miles outside of Redemption Creek, the nearest excuse for a town, though calling it a town was generous. It was more a collection of necessity, a general store, a blacksmith, a saloon that doubled as a courthouse on Tuesdays, and a church that stood empty except for the traveling preacher who came through once a month, weather permitting. Sam's property stretched for 300 acres of mixed fortune good grassland for grazing a reliable creek that hadn't dried up even in the drought of '71, and enough timber in the north section to keep building and burning through the harsh winters. He ran 40 head of cattle, nothing fancy, just sturdy longhorns that could survive on prairie grass and stubbornness. The ranch house itself was modest but solid, built with his own hands over the course of a year, each board and nail a meditation against memories he couldn't escape. He was 34 years old, but looked older the way men did when they'd seen too much too young. His hair, once copper bright, like his Irish mother's, had darkened and shot through with premature gray at the temples. A scar ran from his left eyebrow into his hairline, a souvenir from Chancellorsville that gave him a perpetual look of skepticism. His hands were a study in contradiction surgeons' fingers that could tie sutures fine as spider silk, now calloused and cracked from ranch work, equally comfortable with a scalpel or a branding iron. The war had made him a doctor by necessity rather than choice. He'd been studying to be an engineer before Fort Sumter had dreams of building bridges that would connect the country. Instead, he'd learned to amputate limbs and dig bullets out of boys who looked too much like his younger brother Thomas, the same Thomas who died in his arms at Gettysburg 3 days past his 18th birthday. "You can't save everyone, Sam," Thomas had whispered with his last breath, blood frothing pink at his lips. "But don't stop trying." Sam had stopped trying the day he'd buried his brother in Pennsylvania soil. He'd finished out the war because desertion wasn't in his nature, but his heart had gone into that grave. When the peace came, he'd taken his discharge papers, his medical supplies, and headed west away from everything that reminded him of what he'd lost and what he'd failed to save. The bottle helped sometimes. Whiskey was a more reliable companion than hope, and it made the nights shorter, if not easier. He'd developed a routine of sorts, work himself to exhaustion during the day, drink himself to numbness at night, wake before dawn to do it all again. It wasn't living exactly, but it was existing, and for 3 years that had been enough. Clara Bennett represented everything Sam had trained himself not to think about. She moved through his space now with a competence that seemed to reorganize the very air around her. Even exhausted, even desperate, she commanded her environment rather than being commanded by it. As they rode toward the dugout where her children waited, he found himself studying her with a doctor's eye. And something else. Something he'd thought had died with his brother. She was perhaps 28, though hardship had etched lines that suggested more years. Her hair, dark as wet earth, was pulled back in a practical bun that had half escaped its pins. Her dress, he noted, had been altered multiple times, taken in, as she'd grown thinner hemmed and rehemmed as the fabric wore. But the stitching was precise, almost surgical in its neatness. This was a woman who took pride in small dignities, who fought entropy with needle and thread. "Your husband," Sam said as they rode. "You said consumption. That's what killed him, yes." Clara's voice was steady, matter of fact. "But the war killed him first. Just took longer to finish the job. He was at Gettysburg, field surgeon with the 43rd Pennsylvania. We met there, actually. She paused, seeming to weigh her words. "I was with the Sanitary Commission, volunteer nurses." Sam knew about the Sanitary Commission middle-class women who defied convention to serve as nurses, facing not just the horrors of war, but the scorn of those who thought women had no place near a battlefield. They'd saved thousands of lives, his own included, probably though the days after his own wounding were a morphine-hazed blur. James never recovered from what he saw, Clara continued. Oh, his body healed from the dysentery that nearly killed him in '64, but his spirit. He'd wake up performing surgeries in his sleep, his hands moving through amputations that existed only in his nightmares. The consumption just gave him permission to stop fighting. They created a small rise, and below them, tucked against a creek bank, was the dugout, little more than a hole carved into the earth, with a piece of canvas for a door. Smoke trickled from a pipe that served as a chimney. It was the kind of shelter that even desperate homesteaders would abandon, yet Clara had made it a home for 3 weeks. "Rose, I'm back," Clara called out before they'd even dismounted. "I brought medicine and help." The canvas pulled back, and a girl appeared, thin as her mother, but with the same straight spine, the same refusal to be diminished by circumstance. Her hair was lighter touched with red gold that caught even the weak winter sun. She looked at Sam with eyes too knowing for 7 years. "Mama Thomas got worse. He's talking but not making sense. He keeps asking for Papa." Clara was off her horse and through the entrance before Sam could offer to help her down. He followed, having to duck low to enter the dugout, and what he found inside stopped him short. It was clean. Despite being literally a hole in the ground, despite the dirt walls and floor, the space was meticulously organized. Blankets were folded with military precision. Their few possessions, a Bible, a sewing kit, a battered pot, were arranged on a shelf made from scavenged boards. And in the corner, on a makeshift bed, raised off the ground with more boards and stones, lay a small boy whose fevered breathing filled the cramped space. Sam had seen plenty of field hospitals that were less organized than this dugout. Clara had created order from chaos, dignity from desperation. It spoke to something fundamental in her character, an unwillingness to surrender to circumstances, no matter how overwhelming. "Hold the lantern high, Rose," Clara instructed, already preparing the medicine with practiced efficiency. "Mr. McKenna, I'll need that clean water now." They worked together in the cramped space with a synchronization that surprised them both. Sam held the boy while Clara administered the quinine, her touch gentle but firm. Thomas thrashed weakly, lost in fever dreams, calling out words that made no sense except for the repeated cry for his father. "Shh, my brave boy," Clara whispered, cooling his forehead with a cloth. "Mama's here. You're going to be fine." Sam watched her work, noting the way she monitored the boy's pulse without seeming to how she tracked his breathing patterns, while maintaining a stream of soothing words. This wasn't just maternal instinct, this was training experience skill. "You were more than just a volunteer nurse," he said. It wasn't a question. Clara glanced at him, something defensive flashing in her eyes before softening. "My father was a doctor in Philadelphia. Old school, didn't believe in female physicians, but he couldn't stop me from reading his books, watching him work. When the war came," she shrugged. "The dying didn't care about propriety. They just wanted someone who could help." Over the next 2 hours, they fought for Thomas's life in that cramped dugout. The fever raged, peaked, and finally blessedly began to break. The boy's breathing eased from desperate gasps to something approaching normal sleep. His skin, which had been burning dry, developed the first sheen of healing perspiration. "Thank God," Clara breathed, and for the first time since he'd caught her in his shed, she allowed herself to slump with exhaustion. "He'll need consistent care for the next 48 hours, Sam said. "Temperature monitoring, regular doses. And this place," he looked around the dugout. "The dampness alone could trigger pneumonia before the fever's fully broken." "I know," Clara said quietly. "But we have nowhere else." "You do now." The words came out more forcefully than Sam intended. "I told you before you're coming back to my ranch. All of you." Rose, who'd been silent through the crisis, spoke up. "Mama doesn't take charity." "Rose," Clara admonished, but Sam held up a hand. "She's right to be suspicious," he said, addressing the child directly. "But this isn't charity. Your mother has skills I need. I've been running that ranch alone for 3 years, and it shows. The house needs a woman's touch. I need help with the medical supplies I've let go to waste, and—" He paused, surprised by his own honesty. "And I've forgotten what it's like to have people around who aren't cattle." "We're not cattle," Rose said seriously. "No." Sam agreed. You're much more complicated. Cattle don't ask questions or require schooling or need their clothes mended properly. But I figure your mother can handle all that while helping me remember what civilization looks like. Clara studied him for a long moment. What aren't you telling me? Mr. McKenna men don't just take in strangers, especially not a widow with 2 children. What do you really want? It was a fair question, and Sam found he didn't have a complete answer. What did he want? To stop drinking himself to sleep? To hear voices in his house that weren't ghosts? To pay a debt to all the nurses who'd saved him and whom he'd failed to save in return? I want to stop living like the war is still happening, he said finally. And something tells me you do too. The wind picked up outside, rattling the canvas door and sending small cascades of dirt from the ceiling. Thomas stirred, but didn't wake his breathing steady now. Rose moved closer to her mother, protective and wary. We'll come, Clara said at last. But as employees, not charity cases. I'll cook clean help with medical matters if needed. The children will help with age-appropriate chores. And we'll need clear terms, room board, and wages. Agreed, Sam said. Though we'll have to negotiate the wages once I figure out what I can afford. Ranch isn't exactly profitable yet. Then we'll make it profitable, Clara said with a determination that made Sam believe she could do exactly that. As they prepared Thomas for transport, wrapping him carefully in blankets, Sam noticed Clara pause to pack their few belongings. She handled each item with care, not because they were valuable, but because they were all she had managed to hold on to. The Bible had pressed flowers in its pages. The sewing kit contained a lock of hair tied with a faded ribbon. These were the artifacts of a life interrupted, a family broken but not defeated. My husband saved that Bible from a burned church in Virginia, Clara said, noticing Sam's attention. He said if God's word could survive, that we could survive anything. Did you believe him? Clara secured the Bible in her bag before answering. I believed he needed to believe it. Sometimes that's enough. They made a strange procession heading back to Sam's ranch, him riding slow, with Thomas bundled in his arms, Clara walking alongside with her hand on the boy's forehead, Rose following on Clara's horse, which Sam had fetched from where they'd hidden it. The snow had stopped, leaving the world pristine and deceptively peaceful. As they crested the hill and Sam's ranch came into view, solid and welcoming against the white landscape, he heard Clara draw in a sharp breath. It's beautiful, she said softly. It's lonely, Sam replied without thinking, then felt heat rise in his face. Not anymore, Clara said, and there was something in her voice that sounded like a promise. The first night in a real bed nearly killed Thomas all over again. His small body, accustomed to the hard-packed earth of the dugout, couldn't settle into the softness. He thrashed and cried out, lost in fever dreams that pulled him back to places no 5-year-old should remember. Clara sat beside him through the dark hours, singing the same lullabies she'd sung when cannons thundered in the distance and when her husband's coughing turned to blood. Sam couldn't sleep either. He stood in his doorway, listening to Clara's voice drift down the hallway low and steady, like a river that knew its course. The melody was familiar, something the nurses had sung at Gettysburg when the morphine ran out, and all they had left were words and human comfort. Sleep, my child, and peace attend thee all through the night. Guardian angels God will send thee all through the night. The words pulled him backward against his will to a field hospital where the air was thick with chloroform and death. He'd been 24 then, fresh from medical college, thrust into a butchery that no textbook had prepared him for. The nurses had moved through that hell like witnesses from another world, their skirts dark with blood, their faces set with terrible determination. There had been one nurse, he remembered her now with sudden clarity. Dark-haired young, her hands impossibly steady as she held down a screaming soldier while Sam sawed through bone. She'd sung to that boy, even as his blood soaked through her apron, even as other men died waiting their turn. When it was over, when the boy had survived against all odds, She'd looked at Sam with gray-green eyes and said, "You did well, doctor. He'll live to see home." Sam gripped the door frame, the memory so vivid he could smell the copper-sweet scent of blood. Could it have been Clara? The age was right, the coloring, those eyes. But there had been so many nurses, so many faces in that endless parade of suffering. Mr. McKenna. Rose stood at the bottom of the stairs, her small face pale in the lamplight. "Mama needs more clean water. Thomas is sweating through the sheets." "That's good," Sam said, shaking off the past. "The fever's breaking properly. I'll help." They worked through the night, changing sheets, administering medicine, cooling Thomas's burning skin. Clara never faltered, never complained, but Sam saw the exhaustion in the droop of her shoulders, the way she had to blink hard to focus. When dawn finally came, painting the windows gold, Thomas opened clear eyes and asked for breakfast. "Eggs," he said hopefully, his voice tiny but coherent. With the yellow runny, Clara laughed, actually laughed, and it transformed her face entirely. For a moment, Sam saw who she must have been before the war, before widowhood, before desperate poverty. Young and bright and full of possibility. "We'll see what Mr. McKenna has in his kitchen," she said, smoothing Thomas's damp hair. "I have eggs," Sam said quickly, "and bacon, even some preserves from last summer." Rose looked at him suspiciously. "Real preserves, or the kind that's mostly seeds?" "Strawberry," Sam said. "Made them myself. Only a moderate amount of seeds." That earned him almost a smile from the girl. Almost. As Clara prepared breakfast with Rose's help, Sam found himself telling them about the ranch, about his plans that had never quite materialized. "I was going to build a second barn," he said, pointing through the window. "Maybe run horses as well as cattle. My brother, he loved horses. Always said they were smarter than people." "Your brother?" Clara asked carefully, not turning from the stove. "Thomas." Sam's voice roughened. "Same name as your boy. He died at Gettysburg, July 2nd, 1863. The spatula in Clara's hand stilled. "I was there, July 2nd. She turned slowly, her face pale. "The wheat field. Devil's Den. The casualties were—" She stopped, unable to finish. "Unprecedented," Sam supplied. "I know. I was there too. Medical Corps, 63rd New York." They stared at each other across the kitchen, the weight of shared geography pressing down. How many times might they have passed each other in that chaos? How many boys had she helped him save? How many had they failed together without knowing? "I remember a young doctor," Clara said slowly. "Red hair like copper. He worked for 3 days straight. No rest, no food. The other doctors said he was possessed. He saved a boy from the 43rd Pennsylvania, my husband's regiment. Took 6 hours to remove all the shrapnel, but the boy lived." "William Morrison," Sam said immediately. "Farm boy from outside Harrisburg. Took grape shot to the abdomen. Everyone said he was done for." "You remember his name." "I remember all their names." Sam turned away, busying himself with plates. "The ones who lived anyway. The others. They blend together after a while." Clara moved closer, not quite touching, but near enough that he could feel her presence. "That's not true, is it? You remember them too." Sam's hands stilled on the plates. "How do you know?" "Because I do. Every face, every last word, every hand I held while they slipped away." Her voice was soft but fierce. "We carry them, you and I. That's our real wound, not the visible scars, but all those boys we couldn't save." Thomas's laughter from the other room broke the moment Rose was apparently making shadow puppets on the wall with her hands. But something had shifted between Sam and Clara, an understanding that went beyond words. Later that morning, as Clara helped Sam organize his medical supplies, she told him about James. Not the sanitized version she'd given before, but the truth. "He was brilliant," she said, carefully arranging bottles of carbolic acid. "Could diagnose conditions other doctors missed entirely, but the war broke something in him. He'd see symptoms everywhere in strangers on the street, in our children. He became convinced Thomas had consumption like him, would check the boy's temperature a dozen times a day. Rose learned to pretend to cough just to distract him from Thomas. Battle fatigue, Sam said. I've seen it. Hell, I have it. Clara looked at him sharply. You seem functional enough. Whiskey helps. He held up a half-empty bottle from behind the supplies. Or it did. Haven't touched it since yesterday morning. Why not? Sam considered the question. Hard to drink when there are children in the house. Their eyes are too clear. Clara understood. She'd seen how Rose watched everything, cataloging adult failures with unforgiving precision. Children were mirrors that reflected what you really were not, what you pretended to be. James tried to stop drinking, Clara said. The laudanum, too. But the nightmares were worse than the addiction. He'd wake up screaming about boys calling for their mothers about the pile of amputated limbs behind the surgery tent. He said the drugs at least made the ghosts quieter. Do you have them nightmares? Different ones. Clara's voice went distant. I dream about the wives, the mothers, the letters I had to write. Dear Mrs. So-and-so, your son died bravely. Such a pretty lie. Most of them died crying and afraid. But what good would the truth do? Sam remembered his own letter, the one about Thomas. It had said his brother died instantly, painlessly. In reality, Thomas had lived for 6 hours, most of it in agony, begging Sam to make it stop. Sam had held his brother's hand and lied, promised him he'd be fine, that they'd go home together, that their mother was making his favorite apple cake for his return. The lies we tell to ease suffering, Sam said. Sometimes I think they're the only real medicine we had. Rose appeared in the doorway, her expression serious. Mama Thomas wants to go outside. He says the walls are too close. Clara started to object, but Sam intervened. Wrap him well. The fresh air will do him good. There's a chair on the porch he can sit in, watch the chickens. As they settled Thomas outside, bundled in quilts, with his eyes bright at the sight of sky and space, Sam found himself really looking at the boy for the first time. He had his mother's delicate features, but something else too, a stillness, a way of observing that seemed beyond his years. You were very sick, Thomas said to Sam. It wasn't a question. How do you know? You have the same eyes as Papa, like you're looking at something nobody else can see. Clara started to shush him, but Sam held up a hand. You're right, Thomas. I was sick. Still am, maybe. But your mother's helping me get better. She's good at that, Thomas said matter-of-factly. She fixed Mrs. Henderson's baby when everyone said it would die, and Mr. Carroll's leg when the bone was sticking out. Thomas, Clara said warningly. It's true. Rose defended her brother. Everyone in Missouri came to Mama instead of the real doctor because she didn't judge them for being poor. Sam looked at Clara with new interest. You practiced medicine after the war. Clara's jaw tightened. I helped where I could. People didn't care about licenses when their children were dying. The real doctor reported her, Rose said, anger flashing in her young eyes. Said she was practicing without authority. That's why we had to leave. Rose, enough. But the girl wasn't finished. He was jealous because Mama could do things he couldn't. She saved the Hendricks baby when he said it was hopeless. She set bones that healed straight when his always went crooked. He couldn't stand that a woman was better than him. Sam felt a familiar anger rise in his chest, the same rage he'd felt during the war, when bureaucrats who'd never seen a battlefield made decisions that cost lives. Clara had the skills, the knowledge, the calling, but because she was a woman, she was branded a criminal for saving lives. Is that why you came west, running from prosecution? Clara met his eyes steadily. Among other reasons, James's family never approved of me. After he died, they wanted to take the children, raise them properly. They had money, influence. I had nothing but skills they said I shouldn't have. So you ran. I survived. There's a difference. That afternoon, as Thomas napped and Rose helped with the chickens, Sam showed Clara his study, a room he'd barely entered in months. Medical texts lined the shelves, gathering dust. A microscope sat covered on the desk. Surgical instruments lay in their case clean but unused. "I thought I was done with all this," he said. "Thought if I could just raise cattle work with my hands, I could forget. But you can't." Clara ran her fingers along the spine of an anatomy text. "Because it's not just what we did. It's who we are." She was right. Sam had tried to bury the doctor with his brother, but the healer in him had never really died. It had just been waiting dormant for something to wake it up. "I see them sometimes," Sam admitted. "The ones I lost. They stand at the foot of my bed, asking why I couldn't save them." "They're not asking that," Clara said softly. "They're asking why you stopped trying." That night, Sam didn't drink. Instead, he sat with Clara by the fire while the children slept, and they talked about the war. Not the glory or the cause, but the reality. The smell of gangrene, the sound of bone saws, the weight of deciding who got the last of the morphine. They were conversations they could never have had with anyone who hadn't been there, who hadn't walked through that particular valley of shadow. "I loved him," Clara said suddenly, speaking of James. "But he never came back from the war." "Not really. I spent 3 years married to a ghost who looked like my husband." "Maybe that's what we all are," Sam said. "Ghosts trying to remember how to be human." Clara looked at him across the fire, her eyes reflecting the flames. "Then perhaps it takes one ghost to teach another how to be solid again." Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the tracks they'd made that morning, erasing the path from the dugout to the ranch. But inside, warmed by fire and tentative connection, 2 damaged souls began the slow work of remembering what it meant to hope. The morning Sam realized who Clara really was came 3 weeks after she'd moved into the ranch. Thomas had recovered fully, transforming from a fevered wraith into a boy who couldn't stop exploring every corner of his new world. Rose had begun to smile occasionally, though she still watched Sam with careful eyes, waiting for him to reveal whatever darkness she was certain he harbored. It was wash day, and Clara had insisted on handling the laundry, despite Sam's protests that it could wait. She stood at the wash basin sleeves, rolled up her arms deep in soapy water. The morning sun caught the steam rising from the basin, creating a halo effect around her that made Sam's breath catch. But it wasn't her beauty that stopped him. It was the scar. There, on her left forearm, was a distinctive mark, a crescent-shaped scar with 3 small dots beside it, like a moon attended by stars. Sam knew that scar. He'd been there when she got it. "July 3rd, he said, his voice strange and hollow. "The field hospital near Devil's Den. A cavalry saber fell from a table. You caught it to keep it from hitting a wounded boy." Clara's hand stilled in the water. She didn't turn around. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I knocked it off the table. I was exhausted, clumsy. You grabbed the blade with your bare hand." Sam moved closer, his heart hammering. "You were the nurse who helped me with Private Morrison, the one who sang while I operated." Clara turned slowly, soapsuds still clinging to her arms. Her face had gone pale. The young doctor with red hair, the one who wouldn't stop even when the other surgeons told him to rest. "You brought me coffee," Sam continued, the memory flooding back with painful clarity. "Real coffee, not the chicory swill everyone else had. You said that tired hands make mistakes, and these boys deserve steady hands," Clara finished. "I remember. They stood frozen, separated by 3 feet and 10 years, while the past crashed into the present with devastating force." Sam could see it all now, Clara's younger face beneath the blood, and exhaustion, the way she'd moved through the chaos with impossible grace, how she'd held men's hands as they died and never once looked away. "You saved my brother," Clara whispered. "Not Thomas, my other brother, Joseph. He was with the 20th Maine, shot through the lung. Every other doctor said he was done for, but you—" She had to stop, overwhelmed. "You worked on him for 4 hours. Told me to keep talking to him, keep him fighting. He lived because of you. Where is he now?" "Minnesota. Has a farm, a wife, 3 children. He names his youngest after the doctor who saved him." Clara's eyes filled with tears. Samuel Joseph Hartley. Sam had to sit down. The weight of coincidence, no, not coincidence, something more deliberate, more meaningful, was too much to bear standing. All this time you were her, the nurse who... He couldn't finish. Who? What? Sam looked up at her, unable to hide the raw emotion in his face. Who gave me a reason to keep going? After Thomas died, after I'd failed to save my own brother, I wanted to follow him. Thought about it every night. But then you'd appear with coffee or clean bandages or just a moment of human kindness, and I'd think, if she can keep going, so can I. Clara dried her hands slowly, deliberately, as if the mundane action could ground them both. You didn't fail your brother Sam. I was there. I saw you fight for him. You saw me lose him. I saw you hold him while he died. I saw you close his eyes and then walk straight back into surgery to save someone else's brother. Clara moved closer, close enough that Sam could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. Do you know what the other nurses called you? The angel of lost causes, because you never gave up even when hope was gone. I gave up after the war, Sam said bitterly. Came out here to hide. You came out here to heal. There's a difference. Rose's voice interrupted them from the doorway. Mama, there's a rider coming. Looks official. They moved to the window, watching as a man in a black coat approached on horseback. Sam recognized him, Frederick Marsh, the territory's circuit judge, who also served as legal representative for several Eastern interests. Mrs. Clara Bennett, Marsh asked when Clara answered the door, Sam standing behind her. Yes. I'm here regarding the custody petition filed by Mr. Harrison Bennett of Philadelphia. As the brother of your deceased husband, he's claiming guardianship of the minor children, Rose Marie Bennett and Thomas James Bennett. Clara's face went white. Sam stepped forward. On what grounds? Marsh looked at him dismissively. And you are Samuel McKenna. This is my property, and Mrs. Bennett is my employee. Ah, Marsh pulled out a document. The grounds, Mr. McKenna, are moral unfitness. Mrs. Bennett has been practicing medicine without license, living in unsuitable conditions, and now apparently residing with an unmarried man. She's my housekeeper, Sam said sharply. With proper accommodations. The children have their own room. Mrs. Bennett has hers. Nevertheless, Mr. Harrison Bennett has resources and standing. He's prepared to provide the children with education, proper society, all the advantages. Marsh handed Clara the papers. You have 30 days to respond. I'd suggest you find legal representation, though between us, Mrs. Bennett fighting, this would be costly and likely futile. After Marsh left, Clara sank into a chair, the legal papers trembling in her hands. Harrison never approved of me. Said I was too willful, too educated for a proper wife. When James died, he offered to take the children if I signed papers saying I was unfit. I refused and ran. He can't take them, Rose said fiercely, Thomas clinging to her hand. We won't go. It's not that simple, sweetheart, Clara said. Though her voice broke on the words, Sam took the papers, reading through the legal language with growing anger. Harrison Bennett had built a thorough case, Clara's unauthorized medical practice, her poverty, her unseemly behavior in living with a bachelor. It was all twisted truth, making survival look like moral failure. There's one way to fight this, Sam said slowly. It would make his entire case fall apart. Clara looked up at him. How? Marry me? The room went silent. Even Thomas stopped fidgeting. Clara stared at Sam as if he'd spoken in tongues. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Sam set down the papers. As your husband, I'd have legal standing. The children would have a stable home, 2 parents. The moral argument disappears. And Harrison Bennett would have no grounds for custody. You'd do that. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Take on a ready-made family to spite a man you've never met. I'd do it because it's right. Sam paused, then decided on complete honesty. And because the thought of you leaving, all of you leaving, makes me realize how empty this place was before you came." "Mr. McKenna," Rose said in her serious way. "Do you like my mother?" "Rose," Clara protested, but Sam answered the child directly. "Yes, I do. Very much. I liked her even before I knew I'd met her before. And you won't send us away, even if Thomas gets sick again, or I'm difficult." "Are you difficult?" Sam asked with mock surprise. "I hadn't noticed." Rose almost smiled again. "That was twice in one day, a record." "This is insane," Clara said, standing abruptly. "You can't marry someone to solve a legal problem." "People have married for worse reasons," Sam pointed out. "And we're not strangers. We've known each other for 10 years in a way. We knew each other for 3 days in hell 10 years ago. That's not the same thing." "Isn't it?" Sam moved closer to her. "You trusted me with your brother's life then. You trusted me with your son's life 3 weeks ago. Can't you trust me with this?" Clara looked at her children, at the legal papers, at the man offering to save them all. "It wouldn't be real." "It would be as real as we make it." Sam's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to let me help you the way you helped me all those years ago, the way you're helping me now just by being here." Thomas tugged on his mother's skirt. "Mama, I like it here. The chickens are funny, and Mr. Sam lets me help with the horses. And he has books," Rose added quietly. "Real books, not just the Bible. He said I could read them." Clara looked between her children, and Sam torn between pride and pragmatism. "If we did this, and I'm not saying yes, it would have to be a business arrangement. Clear terms, clear boundaries." "Whatever you need," Sam agreed. "I'd continue as housekeeper and medical assistant. The children would do age-appropriate chores. You wouldn't be responsible for our debts or past obligations." "Clara," Sam interrupted gently, "you're negotiating against yourself. I'm offering to marry you, not hire you for a more complex position." "Why?" The question came out raw, desperate. "Why would you do this?" Sam thought about all the reasons: loneliness, duty, the desire to save something after failing to save so much. But in the end, he gave her the simplest truth. "Because when I saw you that first morning stealing eggs to save your son, I saw someone who refuses to give up. And that reminded me that I used to be that way too. Before the war, before Thomas, before everything broke." He took a breath. "You make me want to be that person again. The one who fights for things instead of hiding from them." Clara was quiet for a long moment, then looked at the scar on her arm, the one that connected them across years and miles. "I need time to think." "Take all the time you need." "But Clara." Sam waited until she met his eyes. "Harrison Bennett will move fast. Men like him always do." That evening, after the children were asleep, Clara found Sam in his study. He was reading one of his medical texts, or pretending to she could see he'd been on the same page for the past hour. "I've been thinking about that day," she said from the doorway. "July 3rd, after you saved Joseph." Sam looked up. "What about it?" "You broke down behind the surgery tent. You thought no one saw, but I did. You were sobbing, saying a name over and over. Thomas." "My brother had been dead for 24 hours, Sam said quietly. "I kept thinking if I saved enough other brothers, somehow it would balance out." Clara entered the room, fully sitting in the chair across from his desk. "I wanted to comfort you, but I didn't know how. You seemed so—" She searched for the word. "Unreachable." "I was. Then. And now." Sam set down his book. "Now I'm sitting here with a woman who knew me at my worst and doesn't seem repulsed. That feels like something worth reaching for." Clara studied him in the lamplight. He wasn't conventionally handsome. The scar, the premature gray, the weathering from sun and sorrow had seen to that. But there was something solid about him, something true. "If we do this," she said carefully, "I need you to understand I loved James. Part of me always will. I wouldn't want you to stop. Love isn't something that runs out. And you, is there someone you loved? Sam thought of the few courtships before the war, how pale and insignificant they seemed now. I thought I did, but I think I was just young and playing at what I thought love looked like. The war changed what seemed important. Yes, Clara agreed. It did. They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of decision settling around them like snow. Finally, Clara stood. "Ask me again," she said. "Properly this time." Sam stood too, came around the desk. Without overthinking it, he took her hand, the scarred one, the one that carried their shared history. "Clara Bennett, who saved my brother and my sanity, who makes my empty house feel like a home, who fights for her children like a warrior and sings like an angel. Will you marry me? Not just to defeat Harrison Bennett, not just to save your children, but because I think we could build something good together, something real." Clara looked at their joined hands, his scarred from surgery and ranch work, hers from saving lives and raising children. They were not young, either of them. They were not naive about what the world could take away. But perhaps that made what they could build together stronger. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you." From upstairs, they heard Thomas cough in his sleep, not the terrible sound of illness, just a child dreaming. Rose's footsteps padded across the floor, checking on her brother, as she did every night. The house settled around them, no longer empty, but full of life and possibility. When Clara asked, "Tomorrow, if you're willing, the circuit preacher is in town until Thursday." "Tomorrow." Clara tested the word, then nodded. "Before Harrison can make his next move." Is that the only reason? Clara surprised them both by reaching up to touch the scar on Sam's temple, the one from Chancellorsville. No, it's not the only reason. That night, Sam didn't drink. He didn't need to. For the first time in years, the ghosts were quiet, replaced by something that felt dangerously like hope. And somewhere in the darkness, he could swear he heard his brother Thomas whisper, "Finally, Sam. Finally, you're trying again." And the morning of the wedding dawned gray and bitter, with winds that cut through even the thickest coat. Sam stood at his shaving mirror, hands steadier than they'd been in years, watching his reflection transform from hermit to bridegroom. He'd trimmed his hair, shaved clean for the first time in months. The man looking back at him seemed younger, or perhaps just less defeated. "You clean up acceptable?" Rose observed from the doorway. Her child's bluntness softened by something that might have been approval. She wore her best dress, which was to say her only dress without patches, and Clara had braided her hair with unusual care. "Thank you, Miss Rose. You look quite elegant yourself." "Mama's crying," Rose announced. "She says she's not, but her eyes are all red." Sam set down his razor. "Is she having second thoughts?" "No." Rose stepped into the room, suddenly looking far older than her 7 years. "She's crying because she's putting on her wedding dress, the one from when she married Papa." Sam's stomach tightened. Of course. What else would she have? "Does that upset you?" Her marrying again. Rose considered this with her characteristic seriousness. "Papa's been gone longer than he was sick, and he told me before he died to take care of Mama. I can't do that alone. I'm too small." "You've done a remarkable job so far." "No," Rose said quietly. "I haven't. She doesn't eat when there's not enough food. She gives Thomas her portions and tells him she already ate. She thinks I don't notice, but I do. She's getting thinner, and sometimes her hands shake." Sam knelt to Rose's eye level. "That stops today, I promise you." "Don't make promises you can't keep," Rose warned. "Papa promised he wouldn't leave us." "You're right. How about this? I promise to try my very best not to leave you, and I promise that as long as I'm here, your mother will eat properly." Rose studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "That's acceptable." From down the hall came Thomas's excited voice. "Mama, you look like an angel, a real angel." Sam and Rose found Clara standing in her bedroom doorway, and Sam's breath caught. The dress was simple white cotton, yellowed slightly with age and storage, but Clara wore it with a dignity that transcended its worn fabric. She'd pinned her hair up with small wildflowers where she'd found wildflowers in November Sam couldn't imagine. "You look." Sam started, then stopped. Beautiful seemed inadequate. Lovely felt trite. "You look like hope," he finally said, and something in Clara's eyes softened. "We should go," she said, but her voice was warm. "Before the weather turns worse." They made an odd wedding party bundled into the wagon against the cold. Thomas sat on Sam's lap, chattering about horses and chickens and whether there would be cake. Rose sat pressed against her mother, protective and watchful. The ride to town felt both eternal and far too quick. The church was nearly empty, just the preacher, his wife, who played organ, and surprisingly, Mrs. Morrison from the general store. She had heard about the wedding from the preacher and insisted on witnessing. "About time Sam McKenna found himself a wife," she announced, pressing a wrapped package into Clara's hands. "Wedding gift. It's not much, just some fabric and thread, but I figure with children, you can always use fabric." "Thank you," Clara said, genuinely touched. "That's very kind." The ceremony itself was brief. The preacher was fighting a cold and wanted to get back to his warm parsonage. But when he asked if Clara took Sam as her husband, her "I do" was clear and certain. And when Sam slipped his mother's ring onto Clara's finger, a simple gold band he'd carried in his pocket for 3 years, without knowing why his hands didn't shake at all. "You may kiss your bride," the preacher said, then coughed violently. Sam leaned in meaning to give Clara a brief, respectful kiss, but she surprised him by placing her hand on his cheek, holding him there for a moment longer than propriety demanded. Her lips were soft, tasting faintly of the peppermint tea she'd drunk for courage. "Well," she whispered against his mouth, "I suppose we're really doing this." "I suppose we are," he whispered back. Thomas clapped enthusiastically. Rose watched with her usual suspicion, but Sam caught her almost smile 3 times in 2 days now. The preacher's wife played a wheezy version of the wedding march on the organ, and Mrs. Morrison threw dried lavender she'd pulled from her pocket. Outside, the wind had picked up even more, driving ice crystals against their faces. Sam helped Clara and the children into the wagon, tucking blankets around them with new husbandly authority. "Mr. McKenna," a voice called out. They turned to see Frederick Marsh, the circuit judge, standing outside the saloon. "I hear congratulations are in order." "News travels fast," Sam said carefully. "Indeed it does. I'll be telegraphing Mr. Harrison Bennett this afternoon about the change in circumstances." Marsh's smile was thin, "though I suspect he won't take the news well." "His feelings aren't my concern," Sam replied. "The welfare of my family is." "Your family," Marsh tested the words. "How quickly things change. Though I wonder, Mr. McKenna, if you fully understand what you've taken on. The Bennett family has resources, influence. They don't like being thwarted." Clara spoke up, her voice steady despite the cold. "Then they should have treated James better when he was alive. They should have helped when he was dying, instead of waiting to swoop in after like vultures." "Careful, Mrs. McKenna," Marsh said, and Clara started at her new name. "Vultures have long memories and sharp talons." "So do mother hawks," Clara replied. "And they're fiercer." Marsh tipped his hat mockingly and retreated to the saloon. Sam felt a surge of pride at Clara's defiance, but also worry. Men like Harrison Bennett didn't accept defeat easily. The ride home was quiet, each of them lost in thought. Thomas had fallen asleep against Sam's chest, trusting and warm. Rose held her mother's hand tightly, as if afraid she might disappear. The landscape around them was harsh, unforgiving, but inside their small circle of warmth, something new was taking shape. When they reached the ranch, Sam carried Thomas inside while Claire and Rose followed. The house felt different now, not just occupied, but claimed. This was the McKenna family home, now not just Sam's hiding place. "I should make dinner," Clara said, starting toward the kitchen, but Sam caught her hand. "It's your wedding day. Let me cook tonight." You can cook? Rose asked skeptically. I survived 3 years alone out here. I can manage basic food. Sam grinned. It might not be good, but it'll be edible. As Sam worked in the kitchen making a simple stew and cornbread, he could hear Clara upstairs with the children helping them out of their good clothes and into everyday wear. The domestic sounds, footsteps, voices, Thomas's laughter filled spaces in the house he hadn't known were empty. During dinner, eaten at the kitchen table like a real family, Thomas asked, "So, are you our papa now?" The question hung in the air. Clara started to speak, but Sam answered first. "I'm your stepfather, Thomas. Your papa was James Bennett, and nothing changes that. But I'm here now, and I'll take care of you like a father should, if that's acceptable to you." Thomas considered this with 5-year-old gravity. "Can I still remember Papa?" "Of course," Clara said quickly. "We'll always remember Papa." "Then it's acceptable," Thomas decided. Papa Sam, can you teach me to ride a horse?" "When you're a bit bigger," Sam promised. That evening, after the children were in bed, Sam and Clara sat by the fire, still in their wedding clothes. The weight of what they'd done settled around them like the darkness outside. "I have a confession," Clara said. "I'm terrified." "Of Harrison?" "No." "Well, yes, but that's not what I mean." She turned to face him. "I'm terrified of failing at this, at being a wife again, at pretending everything is normal when nothing about this is normal." "Who says we have to pretend?" Sam moved closer, not quite touching, but near enough to offer comfort. "We're two war-damaged souls trying to build something from ruins. There's nothing normal about that, and maybe that's good. Normal didn't work for either of us before." "James and I had a normal courtship," Clara said softly. "Chaperoned walks, letters, a proper engagement. We were so young, so certain about how life would unfold. Then the war came, and normal became meaningless. And now I'm married to a man I've known for 3 weeks, sitting in a house I'd never seen a month ago, in a territory I'd never heard of a year ago." She laughed, but it wasn't bitter. "And somehow it feels more honest than all those proper courtships and careful plans." Sam reached out, taking her hand. The wedding ring caught the firelight, looking like it belonged there. "We could have a normal marriage if you want. Separate rooms, polite distance, a business arrangement." "Is that what you want?" Sam thought about lying, about preserving her comfort and his dignity. But they'd been too honest with each other to stop now. "No. I want to know what it's like to wake up next to someone who understands why I have nightmares. I want to teach Thomas to ride and watch Rose read every book in my study. I want to build something with you that neither of us could build alone." Clara squeezed his hand. "That's a lot of wanting." "I haven't wanted anything in 3 years. It feels good to want again." They sat in silence for a while, hands linked, watching the fire die down. Finally, Clara stood. "I should go to bed. It's been a long day." Sam stood, too suddenly awkward. "Clara, about sleeping arrangements?" "I don't expect that is your welcome to the main bedroom. I can take the—" "Sam." Clara stopped him with a gentle hand on his arm. "We're married. We're adults. And we're both too tired and too damaged to complicate this with false modesty." She paused, gathering courage. "I'd like to not be alone tonight. Not for that. Just to not be alone. Is that acceptable?" "More than acceptable," Sam said quietly. They climbed the stairs together, checking on the children. Thomas sprawled across his bed, like a starfish. Rose curled tight with a book still in her hands. Clara gently removed the book, kissed both children, and followed Sam to what was now their room. They prepared for bed with careful politeness, backs turned, preserving privacy while sharing space. When they finally lay down, there was a careful distance between them, but their hands found each other in the darkness. "Tell me something about before," Clara said. "Before the war." Something good, Sam thought. Sunday dinners at my mother's house. She'd make roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, her English grandmother's recipe. Thomas and I would fight over the last piece of pudding, and she'd always have secretly made an extra one just for us to share. That's lovely. She sounds wonderful. She was. Died the winter before the war. Maybe that's a mercy she never had to know about Thomas. Clara turned toward him in the darkness. She knew you loved him. That's what mothers really need to know, that their children love each other. Tell me something about you. Before. I wanted to be a doctor, Clara admitted. I read every medical text my father would let me touch. I even applied to the Female Medical College of Pennsylvania, but then I met James at a lecture, and suddenly being a doctor's wife seemed like enough. Then the war came, and I got to practice medicine anyway, just not the way I'd imagined. You're still a doctor, Sam said firmly. Degree or no degree, you're a doctor. Can't legally practice. To hell with legal. Out here, legal is what keeps people alive. Clara laughed softly. You're going to be a corrupting influence, aren't you? I hope so. You've been a good influence on me. It's only fair I return the favor. A coyote howled somewhere in the distance, and Clara shivered. Sam pulled the quilt higher, creating a warm cocoon against the prairie night. Sam, what if Harrison doesn't give up? Then we fight him, together. You make it sound simple. Not simple, but possible. Everything's possible when you're not alone. Clara was quiet for so long, Sam thought she'd fallen asleep. Then she said, I haven't felt not alone in a very long time. Neither have I. They fell asleep, like that hands linked between them while outside the wind howled and the temperature dropped toward zero. But inside the house, warmth grew, not just from the banked fires in the stoves, but from the fragile connections being forged between broken people, determined to heal. In the morning, they would face whatever Harrison Bennett threw at them. But tonight, they were simply the McKennas, a family stitched together from loss and necessity, and the stubborn hope that broken things could be made whole again. The first real test came 3 days after the wedding. Sam woke to find Clara gone from the bed, her side cold. Panic flared briefly had she reconsidered, had she taken the children and run. But then he heard her voice from outside, calm and authoritative. Hold him steady, Rose. Thomas, bring more clean cloths. Quickly now. Sam grabbed his medical bag and rushed outside to find Clara kneeling beside a man he didn't recognize, blood soaking through makeshift bandages on his leg. A woman, presumably his wife, held his head in her lap, tears streaming down her face. Axe slipped, the woman explained frantically. We're the Kowalskis from the next homestead over. Someone in town said you had a doctor here. My wife's the doctor, Sam said, kneeling beside Clara. What do you need? Clara didn't miss a beat at his public acknowledgement of her skills. Carbolic acid from your bag, sutures, and the laudanum. The cut's deep, but missed the main artery. Rose, you'll need to help hold the wound closed while I stitch. I can help too, Rose said, her young face pale but determined. No, sweetheart. I need you to take Mrs. Kowalski inside and make strong tea with lots of sugar for the shock. Can you do that? Rose nodded and gently led the crying woman away. Thomas stood frozen, staring at the blood. Thomas, Sam said gently, go get the whiskey from the cabinet. The good bottle. Mr. Kowalski's going to need it. As the boy ran off, Sam and Clara worked in perfect synchronization. She cleaned and stitched while he held the wound, their hands moving with the practiced ease of their battlefield days. Mr. Kowalski, a Polish immigrant with barely any English, gritted his teeth and bore the pain with stoic determination. You've done this before, he managed to say to Clara. Many times, she replied, tying off another suture, though usually with bullets, not axes. War, Clara confirmed. My husband, too. We're both veterans in our way. When it was done, when Kowalski was bandaged and resting on their settee, with his wife beside him, Clara stood in the kitchen washing blood from her hands. Sam watched her, saw the slight trembles she was trying to hide. First surgery since James died, he asked quietly. She nodded. I kept thinking I'd make a mistake. that my hands would shake at the wrong moment. But they didn't. No, they remembered what to do. She turned to him. Thank you for saying that. About me being the doctor. It's the truth, and out here, truth matters more than certificates. Word spread quickly about the doctor woman at the McKenna Ranch. Within a week, they had 3 more medical visits. A child with croup, an old woman with persistent stomach pains, a young man with a broken arm from a horse fall. Clara handled each with quiet competence, and Sam assisted without ego content to follow her lead. But it wasn't all medical emergencies. There were quiet moments, 2 small domesticities that slowly stitched them into a real family. Sam teaching Thomas to collect eggs without scaring the chickens. Clara and Rose working on a sampler together by lamplight. All 4 of them struggling through grace before meals. Thomas always adding, "And please make the chickens stop pecking Thomas" at the end. One evening, Sam came in from checking the cattle to find Clara had rearranged his study. His medical texts were now integrated with hers. Apparently, she'd managed to save several from Missouri. Their instruments were cleaned and organized together in a proper medical cabinet she'd fashioned from an old bookshelf. "I hope you don't mind," she said, suddenly uncertain. "It seemed foolish to keep everything separate when we might need it quickly." "It's perfect," Sam said, meaning it. The room looked like what it was, a frontier medical practice run by 2 healers who'd found each other against all odds. That night, as had become their custom, they sat by the fire after the children were asleep. But instead of separate chairs, Clara had moved to the small sofa, leaving space beside her. Sam took the invitation, settling close enough that their shoulders touched. "Tell me about the worst one," Clara said suddenly. "The worst case you couldn't save." Sam knew she wasn't asking about Thomas. This was about the others, the strangers who haunted them both. "Timothy Brennan," he said without hesitation. 16 years old from Brooklyn, grape shot to the abdomen at Antietam. He lived for 3 days in agony the whole time. We ran out of morphine on day 2. I held his hand while he screamed himself to death. Clara leaned into him slightly. "Mine was Sarah Morrison. Not a soldier of contraband, what they called the escaped slaves who came to our camps. She was giving birth, but the baby was turned wrong. I tried everything. I knew everything I'd read. Lost them both. She was 15. Christ. That's when I decided if I survived the war, I'd learn everything. Every medical text, every technique, legal or not." Sam put his arm around her shoulders, and she didn't pull away. "Is that why you really came west? Not just Harrison, but to practice freely?" "Partly. Also because my Thomas has weak lungs like his father. The doctor in Missouri said the dry air out here might help." "Has it? He hasn't had a serious attack since we arrived." "Well, except for the fever, but that was different." They sat quietly, the fire popping and settling. Then Clara said, "I've been thinking about Harrison. He won't give up easily." "I know. I've been expecting something." "What do you think he'll do?" Sam had been pondering this for days. "He'll try to prove the marriage is a sham, send investigators maybe, or arrive himself to make accusations. And when he does," Sam turned to look at her directly, "then we prove him wrong. How do we prove a marriage is real when we've only known each other a month? We don't have to prove we've known each other long. We just have to prove we're committed to this family." He paused. "Aren't we?" Clara met his eyes. "I am. More than I expected to be." "So am I." She reached up, touching the scar on his temple again. It was becoming a habit of hers, this gentle acknowledgement of his wounds. "Sometimes I forget this was supposed to be just a business arrangement." "What is it now?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But it's not just business." Before Sam could respond, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Thomas appeared, rubbing his eyes. "Mama, I had the dream again. About Papa coughing." Clara immediately went to him, lifting him into her arms. "Oh, sweetheart, it's all right. Papa's at peace now. But what if I start coughing like him?" "You won't," Sam said, firmly standing up. Your lungs are getting stronger every day. Want to know how I know? Thomas nodded, tears on his cheeks. Come here. Sam led them to the window. See how cold it is outside. See your breath fogging the glass a month ago that would have made you wheeze. But listen to your breathing now, clear and strong. Thomas listened to himself breathe, wonder dawning on his face. I am breathing good. Well, Clara corrected gently. You're breathing well. I'm breathing well, Thomas repeated dutifully, then looked at Sam. Papa Sam, will you tell me a story about when you were little? Sam carried Thomas back upstairs, Clara following. They sat on either side of the boy's bed, and Sam told the story of the time he and his brother had tried to ride a neighbor's bull, thinking it was just a large cow. Thomas giggled at all the right parts, his eyes growing heavy. Papa Sam, he said sleepily, I'm glad Mama stole your eggs. So am I, buddy. So am I. After Thomas fell asleep, Sam and Clara stood in the hallway, neither wanting to move away just yet. You're good with him, Clara said. With both of them. They make it easy. They're good kids. They're beginning to love you. And I'm beginning to love them. Sam hesitated, then added, all of you. Clara's breath caught. Sam, I know it's too soon. I know we agreed this was arrangement. But Clara, She stopped him with a kiss different from their wedding kiss. This one was deliberate, chosen warm with promise. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. I know, she whispered. Me too. But slowly. Yes, we've both been broken. Let's be careful with each other. As careful as you need, Sam promised. The next morning brought the first snow of real winter, thick and heavy. Sam and Thomas worked to bring the animals into shelter, while Clara and Rose secured the house, banking the fires and checking their food stores. We have enough for 2 months, Rose reported seriously. 3 if we're careful with the preserved meat. You're becoming quite the household manager, Clara said proudly. Someone has to be practical, Rose replied, but she was pleased. That afternoon, as the snow continued to fall, they received an unexpected visitor, Dr. Marcus Thornton from Redemption Creek, the man who'd reported Clara for practicing medicine in Missouri. Mrs. Bennett, he said coldly when Clara answered the door. Or should I say Mrs. McKenna now? Dr. Thornton, Clara replied evenly. What brings you out in this weather? Professional courtesy. I wanted to warn you that I'll be filing a complaint with the Territorial Medical Board about your illegal practice of medicine. Sam appeared behind Clara. On what grounds? On the grounds that she's been treating patients without a license. The Kowalskis, the Patterson boy, old Mrs. Chen, all have confirmed receiving medical treatment from your wife. Emergency assistance isn't illegal, Sam said. Any citizen can render aid. Setting bones and performing surgery goes beyond emergency aid, Thornton replied. I've also heard she's been dispensing medicines. My medicines, Sam said firmly. From my supplies under my supervision. I'm a licensed physician, Dr. Thornton. Any treatment my wife provides is under my authority. Thornton's face reddened. You can't seriously claim. I can and I do. Would you like to see my credentials Harvard Medical College field certification from the Union Army? Sam's voice turned cold. Or perhaps you'd like to explain to the Territorial Board why you're harassing a fellow physician's wife for assisting in his practice. This is highly irregular. What's irregular, Clara interrupted, is a doctor more concerned with protecting his monopoly than saving lives. How many patients have you lost this year, Dr. Thornton? Because I haven't lost any. That's exactly the point, Sam said. Now get off my property before I file a complaint about harassment. After Thornton left, Clara leaned against the closed door. He'll make trouble. Let him try. I meant what I said. Any treatment you provide is under my authority. We're partners in this legally and otherwise. That evening, they were surprised by another visitor, Mrs. Morrison, from the general store, accompanied by 2 other women from town. We heard about Dr. Thornton's visit, Mrs. Morrison said. We wanted you to know, Mrs. McKenna, that the women of this town support you. Many of us won't see Dr. Thornton for female troubles. He's rough and dismissive. Having a woman healer available means everything to us. I'm not a licensed, Clara began, but one of the other women interrupted. We don't care about licenses. We care that you treated my sister's milk fever when Dr. Thornton said it was just female hysteria. She'd be dead if not for you. They left Clara with a basket of preserves and a promise of support if needed. Clara stood holding the basket, tears in her eyes. You're building something here, Sam said softly. Something important. We're building it, Clara corrected. Together. That night, the storm intensified, wind howling around the house like a living thing. The children came to their bed. Thomas, frightened by the noise, Rose pretending she was just keeping Thomas company. They made a nest of quilts on the floor by the fireplace, all four of them bundled together, while Sam told stories of medical school, and Clara sang Welsh lullabies her grandmother had taught her. This is nice, Thomas said sleepily. Like we're a real family. We are a real family, Rose corrected. Just a new one. Sam met Clara's eyes over the children's heads. The best kind, he said. The kind that chooses each other. The next morning, they woke to find the storm had passed, leaving the world crystalline and new. The ranch was buried under 2 feet of snow, transformed into something magical. Thomas and Rose immediately wanted to play outside, and Sam helped them build a snowman, while Clara made hot cocoa, real cocoa with milk and sugar, a luxury she'd hoarded for a special occasion. What are we celebrating? Sam asked when she brought out the steaming mugs. Our first month as a family, Clara said, and many more to come. As they stood in the snow, children laughing cocoa, warming their hands, Sam realized this was what he'd been fighting for all those years ago, even if he hadn't known it. Not just survival, but this a family built from broken pieces, stronger for having been mended. Clara, he said quietly, while the children were distracted with their snowman. I need to tell you something. She looked at him, sudden worry in her eyes. I love you, he said simply. Not the memory of you, not the idea of you, but you. Clara McKenna, mother and healer and warrior. I love you. Clara's eyes filled with tears that didn't fall. Oh, Sam, I love you too. I didn't expect, didn't want to, but I do. They kissed in the snow while their children played, and for a moment, the ghosts were completely silent, replaced by something infinitely better. Hope made real love, made manifest a family made whole. But even as they celebrated, a letter was making its way west, carried by train and coach through the snow. A letter from Harrison Bennett declaring his intention to arrive in person to reclaim what he considered his. The real test was coming. But for now, in the snow-bright morning, with their children's laughter filling the air, the McKennas were ready for whatever came next. They'd built something worth fighting for, and they'd fight for it together. Harrison Bennett arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late January, stepping off the stagecoach in Redemption Creek like a man who owned everything he surveyed. He was everything Sam had expected, tall, distinguished with silver at his temples and clothes that cost more than most homesteaders saw in a year. He'd brought a lawyer, a private investigator, and enough arrogance to fill the territorial courthouse. Clara saw him through the general store window, and her face went white. She was in town with Rose picking up supplies while Sam and Thomas worked on repairing the barn door. Mama, Rose said, noticing her mother's stillness. What's wrong? Nothing, sweetheart. Clara forced her voice steady. Just remembered something we need to do at home. But it was too late. Harrison had spotted her, his face lighting with cold satisfaction. He crossed the muddy street with deliberate steps, his companions flanking him like soldiers. Clara, he said, as if they were old friends, you're looking weathered. Harrison, Clara lifted her chin. You're far from Philadelphia. Family obligations bring me anywhere necessary. His gaze shifted to Rose. And this must be little Rose Marie. My, how you've grown. You look just like your father." "I look like my mother," Rose said flatly, moving closer to Clara. Harrison's smile tightened. "Spirited. Your father would be disappointed." "My father loved my spirit," Rose shot back. "He said I got it from Mama." "Yes, well, your father's judgment was often impaired." Harrison pulled out a handkerchief ostensibly to wipe dust from his face, but the gesture was theatrical. "I'm staying at the hotel, such as it is. I'll expect you at 3 o'clock to discuss the children's future." "My children's future is decided," Clara said. "They're staying with me and my husband." "Ah, yes, the hasty marriage to a failed rancher with questionable mental stability." Harrison's investigator had clearly been busy. "We'll see what the judge thinks about that." After he walked away, Rose tugged Clara's hand. "We need to tell Papa Sam." Clara's heart clenched at how naturally Rose called Sam Papa now. "Yes, we do." They found Sam in the barn, Thomas helping by handing him tools, usually the wrong ones, but Sam never corrected him. When Sam saw Clara's face, he immediately set down his hammer. "He's here," Clara nodded. "With reinforcements. He wants to meet at 3. "Then we'll meet him," Sam said simply. "All of us, together." "Sam, he has information. About you, about your drinking, about the truth," Sam interrupted. "I was a drunk. I was barely functional when you found me, but I'm not that man anymore, and that's also the truth." Thomas looked between them, confused. "Who's here?" Clara knelt beside her son. "Your Uncle Harrison, Papa's brother." "I don't remember him." "That's because he never visited when Papa was sick," Rose said bitterly. At 3 o'clock, the McKenna family entered the hotel dining room, which Harrison had commandeered for his purposes. Clara had worn her best dress, the blue one she'd made from the fabric Sam bought her. Sam wore his wedding suit. The children were clean and neat, Rose holding Thomas's hand protectively. Harrison's lawyer, a thin man named Whitmore, had spread papers across the table like weapons. The investigator Burke stood by the window, trying to look menacing. "Let's dispense with pleasantries," Harrison began. "I'm here to take the children back to Philadelphia where they can be raised properly." "They're being raised properly," Sam said calmly. "They're fed, clothed, educated, and loved," Harrison laughed. "Educated in this wilderness, by whom?" "By me," Clara said. "I've been teaching them Latin, mathematics, literature." "The same woman who illegally practices medicine," Whitmore interrupted, "who fled Missouri under threat of prosecution." "The same woman who saved 6 lives in the past month," Sam countered, "including Mrs. Patterson's baby, who Dr. Thornton had given up for dead." Burke spoke up from the window. "Mr. McKenna, is it true you were drinking heavily until recently, that you were known in town as the Hermit Drunk?" Before Sam could answer, a new voice came from the doorway. "He was known as a man grieving his brother." Everyone turned to see Mrs. Morrison entering, followed by several other townspeople, the Kowalskis' Mrs. Chen, the Pattersons with their healthy baby, even the blacksmith and his wife. "What is this?" Harrison demanded. "This," Mrs. Morrison said, "is the community coming to speak for our neighbors." She looked at Harrison with undisguised contempt. "You want to know about Sam McKenna. He's the man who gave the Hendricks family credit when their crop failed. He's the one who helped rebuild the school after the storm. And yes, he drank too much after the war, like half the men in this territory. But he stopped when he had reason to." Mr. Kowalski stepped forward, his English thick but clear. "Mrs. McKenna saved my leg. Dr. Thornton want to cut off. She save it. I still walk, still work because of her." "That's illegal practice," Whitmore began. "That's compassion," Mrs. Patterson interrupted, holding her baby. "Something you'd know nothing about, coming here in your fancy clothes to steal children from their mother." Harrison's face was reddening. "These children deserve better than this frontier squalor." "These children deserve their mother," Mrs. Chen said quietly. She rarely spoke in public, but her voice carried authority. "I see Mrs. McKenna with them. She loves them fierce, like tiger with cubs." You cannot buy that love." Thomas, who'd been silent, suddenly pulled free from Rose and walked to Harrison. "Are you really Papa's brother?" Harrison looked down at the boy, momentarily nonplussed. "Yes, child, I am." "Then why didn't you come when he was sick? Mama wrote you letters. I saw her crying when you didn't answer." The room went silent. Harrison's face showed a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, or just annoyance. "Your father and I had differences." "You were ashamed of him," Rose said, standing beside her brother, "because he married Mama instead of that rich lady you picked. He told us." "That's enough," Harrison snapped. "Children should be seen. Children should be heard," Claire interrupted, moving to stand with her children. "Something James believed, even if you never did." The door opened again, and this time it was Judge Frederick Marsh who entered, but not alone. With him was an elegantly dressed woman whom Clara recognized with shock, Margaret Bennett Harrison's wife. "Margaret." Harrison looked stunned. "What are you doing here?" "What I should have done years ago," Margaret said calmly. She looked at Clara with kind eyes. "Mrs. McKenna, I apologize for my husband's behavior and for my silence when James needed us. Margaret, this is family business." "Yes, it is." Margaret's voice turned steel. "Which is why I'm here." She pulled a letter from her bag. "This is from James, written a month before he died. He asked me to protect his children from you, Harrison. He knew you'd try this." She handed the letter to Judge Marsh, who read it with increasing interest. "This is quite specific," Marsh said. "Dr. Bennett explicitly states he does not want his brother to have custody of his children's sighting." "My goodness, these are serious accusations, Mr. Bennett." Harrison's face had gone pale. "Those are private family matters. Matters that speak to your fitness as a guardian," Marsh replied. He looked at Claire and Sam. "Dr. Bennett also speaks highly of his wife's medical knowledge, even suggesting she knows more practical medicine than most licensed physicians." Sam felt Clara's hand slip into his, trembling slightly. He squeezed it reassuringly. Margaret wasn't finished. "I've also brought these." She produced a packet of letters. Correspondence from James to various medical colleges trying to secure his wife a place to study formally. He believed she had a gift that shouldn't be wasted. Dr. Thornton, who'd been lurking in the corner, stepped forward. "That doesn't make her practice legal." "No," Judge Marsh agreed. "But it makes it understandable. And given that she practices under her husband's supervision, a licensed physician, I see no legal violation here." "This is ridiculous," Harrison burst out. "These children need proper society, proper education." "I can read Cicero in Latin," Rose announced. "In the original. Can your children do that, Uncle Harrison?" "I can do arithmetic," Thomas added proudly. "And Papa Sam is teaching me geometry." "Papa Sam," Harrison sneered. "This man isn't their father. He's more father than you ever were, Uncle," Rose said fiercely. "He reads to us and teaches us and doesn't get angry when Thomas spills things. He helped Mama when she was scared, and he never yells except when the bull got loose, but that was because he was scared for us." Thomas nodded emphatically. "And he let me help save the baby rabbits when their mama died. We fed them with a tiny bottle. 3 of them lived." The townspeople murmured approvingly. Even Judge Marsh seemed charmed. "Children can be coached to say anything," Whitmore said desperately. "Then ask them something unexpected," Mrs. Morrison suggested. "Ask them about their daily life." Judge Marsh considered this. "Thomas, what did you have for breakfast?" "Eggs and bacon and Mama's biscuits with jam. But I don't like the seeds in the jam, so Papa Sam makes me special jam without seeds on Sundays." "Rose, what are you reading currently?" "David Copperfield by Mr. Dickens. Papa Sam and I are reading it together because some parts are sad, and he explains the hard words." "And what does your mother do in the evenings?" "She sews and tells us stories about when Papa, my first Papa, was young. And sometimes she and Papa Sam talk about medicine, and she teaches him about herbs, and he teaches her about surgery." They use big words we don't understand, but they look happy. Judge Marsh turned to Sam. Mr. McKenna, why did you marry Mrs. Bennet? Sam looked at Clara, then at the children, then directly at the judge. Because I was dead inside and she brought me back to life. Because her children needed a father, and I needed a reason to be better than I was. Because sometimes God gives you a second chance at family, and only a fool refuses it. That's not love, that's opportunity, Harrison said coldly. No, Sam replied. Opportunity was offering to help a desperate woman. Love was realizing I couldn't breathe right when she wasn't in the room. Love was teaching Thomas to ride a horse and wanting to protect Rose from every hurt in the world. Love was watching Clara save lives with knowledge she shouldn't have but does, and being proud instead of threatened. Clara squeezed his hand tighter. Mrs. McKenna, Judge Marsh said. The same question. Clara looked at Harrison first, then at the judge. I married Sam because he saw me stealing to save my child and offered help instead of judgment, because he recognized my skills when the world said I shouldn't have them, because he gave my children safety and love without asking for anything in return, because he's haunted by the same ghosts I am, and together we make them quieter. She turned to face Harrison directly. But mostly I married him because he's everything James would have wanted for us. James knew his family had failed him. He knew you'd come for the children. And he knew I'd need someone strong enough to stand against you. He just didn't know it would be someone who would also teach Thomas to be brave and Rose to be proud of her mind. Margaret Bennet moved to stand beside Clara. Harrison, enough. You've lost. Come home and tend to your own children instead of trying to steal James's. Harrison's face was purple with rage. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Judge Marsh said firmly. Mr. Bennet, I see no grounds for removing these children from their mother and stepfather. They're well cared for, loved, and thriving. Case dismissed. The townspeople erupted in celebration. Mrs. Kowalski hugged Clara. The blacksmith shook Sam's hand hard enough to hurt. Thomas and Rose were passed around for congratulations like small heroes. Harrison left without another word, his lawyer and investigator trailing behind. But Margaret lingered. Clara, she said softly, I brought something else. She handed Clara a small leather journal. James's medical notes. He always said you understood them better than he did. I thought you should have them. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Margaret X. Take care of those babies, Margaret said. And yourself. James would be so proud of what you've built here. That evening, the McKenna house was full of neighbors. What had started as a confrontation had become a celebration. Mrs. Morrison had brought food, the Kowalskis brought their fiddle, and even Dr. Thornton had grudgingly appeared to shake Sam's hand and mutter something about professional courtesy. As the party wound down, Sam found Clara on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the stars. We won, he said, sitting beside her. We did. She leaned into him. But it wasn't just us. It was the community. They stood for us. They stood for you, Sam corrected. You've saved their lives, their children. You've given them something Harrison could never understand. Hope that someone cares whether they live or die. Inside, they could hear Rose reading to Thomas, her voice patient as he sounded out words. The house was warm with lamplight and lingering laughter. Sam, Clara said quietly, what you said in there about love, I meant every word. I know. She turned to face him. I love you too. Not because you saved us, but because you let us save you too. They kissed on the porch while snow began to fall, again gentle this time like a blessing. Inside, their children were safe and happy. Around them, a community had proven that family wasn't just about blood. It was about choice, commitment, and the courage to stand together. What now? Clara asked. Now we live, Sam said simply. We heal people, raise children, tend the ranch. We build the life we both thought we'd lost the chance for. Together, together. As they went inside to tuck the children into bed, neither of them saw the figure watching from the ridge, not Harrison, who was already on his way back east, but another shadow from the past. The war might have ended, but some ghosts weren't done with them yet. But that was tomorrow's worry. Tonight, the McKenna family was whole safe and surrounded by the warmth of community that had chosen to protect them. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was home. Part 8. The Great Crisis. 4,4,500 words. The drought started in March, subtle at first, a few weeks without rain that everyone said was normal for the season. But by April, the creek that had never run dry was down to a trickle. By May, it was a series of stagnant pools where dead fish floated belly up in the scorching sun. The grass turned brown and brittle, crunching like broken bones under boots. Cattle began to drop, their eyes glazed with thirst and surrender. Sam stood at what used to be the creek's edge hat in his hands, watching the last of their water disappear into the cracked earth. 6 of their 40 head were already dead. The rest stood in whatever shade they could find, ribs beginning to show through their hides. "How bad?" Clara asked, approaching with a bucket of their precious well water. "Bad." Sam didn't sugarcoat it. They'd promised each other honesty, even when the truth cut deep. Maybe especially when it cut deep. If we don't get rain in the next 2 weeks, we'll lose half the herd. Maybe more. And if we lose the herd, we lose the ranch. The words hung between them like a death sentence. Can't pay the banknote without selling cattle. Clara set down the bucket and took his hand. Her fingers were rough now, calloused from months of ranch work, but her touch was still gentle. "We've survived worse." "Have we?" Sam's voice carried an edge of desperation. "In the war, at least we knew the enemy. You can't fight weather. You can't operate on drought or shoot at empty clouds." That night, they called a family meeting. Rose and Thomas sat at the kitchen table, faces serious. They'd grown in the months since Harrison's visit. Rose was taller, her face losing its childish roundness, and Thomas had lost his baby teeth, giving him a gap-toothed grin that usually charmed everyone, but no one was smiling now. "We need to talk about what happens if the drought doesn't break," Sam said carefully. "We're not leaving," Rose said immediately. "This is our home." "Sweetheart, we might not have a choice," Clara said gently. "If we can't water the cattle, then we find water." Thomas interrupted his 5-year-old certainty absolute. "We dig deeper or go farther or something. We don't give up." Sam felt his throat tighten. When had this little boy become so fierce? When had he started sounding so much like Sam's brother Thomas, who'd always believed every problem had a solution if you just looked hard enough? "Sometimes trying isn't enough, buddy," Sam said. "Then we try different," Thomas said stubbornly. That phrase, "try different," became their motto over the next weeks. They tried everything. Sam and the neighboring ranchers attempted to dig a new well, but hit bedrock at 20 feet. Clara organized the women to haul water from the last functioning well in town, but it was 15 miles round trip, and barely enough for the people, let alone livestock. They sold the chickens to buy hay, sold Sam's medical instruments to buy grain, sold Clara's wedding dress from James to buy time. Not that Sam protested when she brought the dress to town. "It's just fabric," Clara said practically, though her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "The memories are in here." She touched her heart, not in silken lace. The dress brought enough to keep them going another week, but it was just delaying the inevitable. Other ranchers were abandoning their claims, loading what they could carry, and heading back east or further west, chasing rumors of rain and work. "The Hendricks left yesterday," Clara reported one evening. "The Carlsons are leaving tomorrow." "Smart people," Sam said bitterly, staring at his empty glass. He'd stayed sober through everything, but the urge to drink was crawling up his throat, like thirst itself. "We're smart too," Clara said. "We're just also stubborn." "Is there a difference between stubborn and stupid?" Clara was quiet for a moment. Yes, stubborn keeps fighting when there's still hope. Stupid keeps fighting when hope is gone. Which are we? I don't know yet. The answer came 2 days later in the worst possible way. Thomas collapsed while helping Rose carry water from their last barrel. His breathing was labored, wheezing, the sound Clara had dreaded since James died. "It's the dust," she said, trying to stay calm as she held Thomas in her lap, his small chest working too hard for too little air. "All this drought, the air is full of dirt. His lungs can't handle it." Sam knelt beside them, physician's hands, checking Thomas's pulse, feeling the fever already building. "We need moisture, steam." "With what water?" Clara's composure finally cracked. "We have maybe 3 gallons left. Do we use it to save him now or to drink for the next 2 days?" "We use it now," Sam said without hesitation. "Everything, all of it." They created a tent with sheets around Thomas's bed, boiling their precious water to fill it with steam. Hour after hour, they fed moisture into the air while Thomas struggled to breathe. Rose sat by the door, reading to him from David Copperfield, her voice steady, even as tears rolled down her cheeks. "Don't you dare!" she whispered fiercely when Thomas's eyes started to close. "Don't you dare leave us. We just got Papa Sam. We just got happy. Don't you dare." Outside, the temperature climbed to over 100 degrees. The last of the cattle stood in the shade of the barn, too weak to move. The earth cracked wider, like mouths opening to swallow everything they'd built. On the second night of Thomas's illness, with their water gone and the boy burning with fever, Sam made a decision. "I'm riding to Fort Wallace," he announced. "They have a military doctor there, medicine clean water." "That's 60 miles, Clara protested. "In this heat without water, I'll make it." "Sam, no. It's suicide." He gripped her shoulders, looked her straight in the eye. "I told Rose I wouldn't leave you, but I also won't watch Thomas die when there's something I can do. I didn't save my brother. I won't fail yours." Before Clara could protest further, Sam was saddling their strongest remaining horse. He took no water. There was none to take, just a rifle and a prayer that he'd find some along the way. "Papa Sam." Rose ran out Thomas's toy horse in her hands. "Take this. For luck." Sam tucked the toy into his pocket. "Take care of them," he told Rose. "You come back," she ordered, sounding exactly like her mother. "You hear me? You come back." Sam rode into the dawn, the sun already brutal at first light. Behind him, Clara stood in the doorway, one hand on Rose's shoulder, the other pressed to her heart, where fear was building a nest of thorns. The first 20 miles were manageable. Sam knew where a few seep springs might still have moisture, and he found enough to wet his lips and give the horse a few swallows. But by noon, with the sun directly overhead, and the temperature approaching hellish, both he and the horse were struggling. Mirages danced on the horizon, lakes of blue water that disappeared as he approached trees that turned out to be nothing but heat shimmer and desperation. His lips cracked and bled, his vision blurred. The horse stumbled more frequently, its breathing labored. At mile 35, the horse went down. Sam knelt beside the animal, stroking its neck as it died, whispering apologies. Then he started walking. Each step was agony. His boots, sturdy enough for ranch work, weren't made for walking on superheated earth. The soles began to separate. His feet blistered, then the blisters burst, then new ones formed. He thought of Thomas struggling to breathe, of Clara's eyes when she'd said they had no water left, of Rose ordering him to come back. He walked through the afternoon, through the evening, into the night. The stars came out cold and distant, offering no comfort. His water-starved mind began to play tricks. He saw his brother Thomas walking beside him, young and whole. "You're going the wrong way," his brother said conversationally. "Death's back that direction." "Can't die yet," Sam mumbled through cracked lips. "Got a family now." "You had a family before." "Had me." "Failed you." "No, Ghost," Thomas said gently. "You held me while I died. That's not failing. That's loving. Sam stumbled, fell, got up, kept walking. By dawn of the second day, Fort Wallace rose from the horizon like a fever dream. Sam couldn't feel his feet anymore. His tongue was swollen, his eyes nearly sealed shut with dust and dried tears he didn't remember crying. He collapsed at the gate. When he woke, a military doctor was pouring water into his mouth, tiny sips that felt like salvation. "Thomas," Sam croaked. "Boy, dying. Dust pneumonia." "Slow down, man. You're half dead yourself." "No time." Sam struggled to sit up. "My son, please." It took precious hours to make himself understood to convince the fort commander to send help. But finally, a wagon was loaded with water barrels, medicine, and the fort doctor himself. "This is highly irregular," the commander said. "Please." Sam begged, dignity abandoned. "He's 5 years old." Something in Sam's voice, or maybe in his eyes, convinced them. The wagon set out at the fastest pace the horses could maintain. Sam rode with them, his feet wrapped in bandages, his body screaming for rest he couldn't afford to take. They made it back to the ranch in record time, but Sam's heart sank when he saw the stillness of the place. No smoke from the chimney, no movement in the yard. Even the dying cattle were gone. Clara. He half fell from the wagon, stumbling toward the house. Rose. The door opened, and there was Clara, hollow-eyed and exhausted but standing. "Sam, Sam." She flew into his arms, and he held her despite the pain in his burned hands, his cracked ribs, his everything. "Thomas." "Holding on, barely. Mrs. Morrison brought their last water yesterday, but—" The fort doctor was already moving, carrying his medical bag into the house. What followed was a battle as intense as any Sam had witnessed in the war. The doctor had brought a new treatment, a bronchodilator that had to be administered precisely carefully, while Thomas's small body fought to reject it. "Hold him still," the doctor ordered, and Sam and Clara did their hands steady despite their exhaustion, their fear. Rose stood in the corner, singing the Welsh lullaby Clara had taught her, her voice threading through the crisis like a lifeline. For hours they fought. Thomas seized, twice his body rigid with the effort to breathe. His fever spiked to dangerous levels, then broke, suddenly drenching him in sweat they couldn't afford to replace. Then, just as the sun was setting on the second day, Thomas opened his eyes clearly and said, "I'm thirsty." It was the most beautiful sentence Sam had ever heard. The fort had brought enough water to last a week and medicine to treat Thomas's damaged lungs. But they couldn't save the ranch. With the cattle dead and no rain in sight, the bank note would come due with no way to pay it. "We'll start over," Clara said, that night Thomas sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. "Somewhere else. We've done it before." "I'm tired of starting over," Sam admitted. "I want to build something that lasts." "We have," Clara said, gesturing to the children. "Family lasts." A knock at the door interrupted them. Sam opened it to find half the town standing in his yard. The Kowalskis, Mrs. Morrison, the Pattersons, even Dr. Thornton. They carried baskets, water barrels, and something else hope. "Heard you walk to Fort Wallace and back for the boy," the blacksmith said gruffly. "Man who'd do that deserves help." "We took up a collection," Mrs. Morrison announced. "Enough to pay your bank note and buy seed for when the rain comes." "If it comes," Sam said. "When," Mrs. Morrison said firmly. "It always has before." Dr. Thornton stepped forward awkwardly. I have a proposition. The territory needs doctors. Real doctors. I can't handle it alone anymore." He looked at Clara. "I was wrong before. You have skills I don't. If you're willing, I'd like to propose a partnership. You and Sam both. Proper medical practice. Legal. I'll sponsor your certification with the territorial board." Clara's hand found Sam's. "You'd do that. I've watched you save lives I'd have lost," Thornton admitted. "Pride's a luxury I can't afford anymore, not with lives at stake." That night, after everyone had gone, the McKenna family sat together on the porch. Thomas was wrapped in blankets on Sam's lap, breathing easily. Rose leaned against Clara, the strain of the past days showing in her drooping eyes. "Look," Thomas whispered, pointing at the horizon. Clouds were building in the west, real clouds heavy and dark with promise. "Don't hope too hard," Clara warned, but her voice betrayed her own hope. They sat and watched the clouds approach, watched lightning flicker in their depths, smelled the change in the air that every frontier family knew by heart. The first drops fell just after midnight, soft at first, hesitant, then harder, steadier, until it was a proper rain soaking into the cracked earth, filling the empty creek beds, washing the dust from the air. Thomas laughed, tipping his face up to catch the drops. Rose danced in the yard, arms spread wide. Sam and Clara stood on the porch holding each other, watching their children celebrate. "We survived," Clara whispered. "We did more than that," Sam said, pulling her closer. "We proved Thomas right. When trying isn't enough, you try different." The rain continued through the night and into the next day. Not enough to end the drought completely, but enough to begin healing the land. The creek began to flow again. Green shoots appeared almost overnight. The world, which had seemed determined to end them, offered another chance. A week later, as Thomas continued to recover and the rain became a regular visitor, a letter arrived from Philadelphia. Margaret Bennett had sent a bank draft enough to buy new cattle to truly start over. "James would want this," her letter read. "He always said Clara could survive anything. Now I know he was right. Use this to build the life he'd want his children to have." Sam found Clara crying over the letter, but they were tears of gratitude, of relief, of love for a man who'd loved her enough to ensure she'd be cared for even after death. "We're going to make it," she said, looking up at Sam. "Yes," he agreed, wiping her tears with his thumbs. "We are." Outside, Thomas and Rose were playing in the mud, their laughter bright as summer lightning. The drought had tested them, nearly broken them, but they'd held. Together, they'd held. The West had tried to destroy them with drought and death, but they'd answered with determination and love. It wasn't the life any of them had planned, but it was the life they'd chosen, fought for, and won. Largely the rains that saved them also brought resurrection. By late June, the prairie had transformed from brown wasteland to green ocean grass rippling in waves under the endless Kansas sky. Sam stood with the Territorial Certification Board's letter in his hands, hardly believing the words. "Clara McKenna is hereby granted provisional medical certification pending completion of examination requirements." He read it aloud for the third time, as if repetition might make it more real. Clara took the letter with trembling hands. "They really approved it. Thornton kept his word. He testified about your skills, brought the records of every life you've saved." Sam pulled her close. "You're going to be a real doctor, Clara, legal and proper." "We're going to be doctors," she corrected. "Partners." Rose and Thomas burst through the door, covered in mud from helping the Kowalski boys repair fence lines. "Mama, Papa, Sam, the Hendricks are back. They're moving back onto their claim." It was true. Families who'd fled the drought were returning, drawn by news of rain and the promise of fresh starts. The town was rebuilding, and at its heart was the new medical practice of Doctors McKenna and Thornton, operating out of a converted storefront that Mrs. Morrison had offered at generous terms. "We'll need supplies," Clara said, practically already making lists in her head. "Proper surgical instruments, medicines, beds for patients who need extended care." "I know where we can get them," Sam said. "There's an Army surplus sale at Fort Wallace next month. They're decommissioning the field hospital." Clara looked at him with understanding. "Full circle. Maybe that's how healing works," Sam replied. "Circles, not straight lines." The examination was scheduled for July 15th in Topeka. Clara studied with fierce determination, her medical texts spread across the kitchen table every night. Sam quizzed her while they worked. Rose helped her memorize anatomical terms, and even Thomas contributed by letting her practice examinations on him. "Does my heart sound good, Mama?" he'd ask after she listened with Sam's stethoscope. "Strong as a horse." She'd answer, though Sam could see the shadow of worry that never quite left her eyes when she examined Thomas. The drought pneumonia had left scars on his lungs that would require lifetime vigilance. The night before Clara left for Topeka, the community threw a surprise party at the church. Women who'd once whispered about the propriety of female doctors now pressed her hands and wished her luck. Men who'd been skeptical brought small gifts, a new medical bag from the leather worker, a set of scales from the general store. Dr. Thornton stood to make a toast. When I first met Clara McKenna, I saw her as a threat to my practice. I was wrong. She's not a threat. She's a necessity. This territory needs healers who understand that medicine isn't just about the body, but about the spirit. Clara heals both. Hear, hear. The crowd cheered, and Clara had to excuse herself to hide her tears. Later that night, Sam found her on their porch watching the stars. Nervous. Terrified, she admitted. What if I fail? What if everything I know isn't enough for their tests? Then you'll take it again, Sam said simply. And again, if necessary. But Clara, you won't fail. You know more practical medicine than most doctors learn in a lifetime. How can you be so sure? Because I've watched you work. Because you saved our son. Because you're the woman who walked through hell as a nurse and came out a healer. He took her hands. Because you're Clara McKenna and you don't know how to give up. She kissed him, then deep and sure. When did you become so wise? When I married you. The 3 days Clara was gone were the longest of Sam's life. He tried to stay busy, seeing patients with Thornton working the ranch, teaching Thomas to write his letters, but his mind kept wandering to Topeka, to Clara, facing a panel of male doctors who might resent her very presence. Rose noticed his distraction. "She'll pass," she said confidently. "Mama's the smartest person I know." "Smarter than me," Sam teased. "Much smarter," Rose said seriously. "You married her, didn't you? That's the smartest thing you ever did." On the third evening, Sam was closing the clinic when he heard the stagecoach arriving. He actually ran down Main Street, Rose and Thomas at his heels. The coach door opened, and Clara stepped out, her face unreadable. "Well," Sam could barely breathe. Clara held the moment, then smiled like sunrise. 97%. Highest score they've ever recorded. Sam swept her into his arms, spinning her around while Rose and Thomas cheered. The whole town seemed to materialize, word spreading like wildfire. Doc McKenna passed. She's official. That night, after the celebrations died down and the children were asleep, Sam and Clara lay in their bed, her certification paper prominently displayed on the dresser. "Everything's changing," Clara said softly. 6 months ago, I was stealing eggs to feed my children. Now I'm a certified doctor with a practice and a home, and a husband who loves you beyond reason," Sam finished. "That too." She smiled in the darkness. "Sam, I want to tell you something. About James." Sam tensed slightly. Clara rarely spoke of her first husband in their bed. "I loved him," she continued. "But it was a young love built on who we thought we'd be. The war changed us both, and we spent our last years together trying to pretend we were still those innocent people." She turned to face Sam. "With you, I don't pretend. I'm exactly who I am, broken and mended and fierce and afraid all at once. And you love me anyway." "Not anyway," Sam corrected. "Because I love you because of all that." They made love, then slow and tender a celebration, not just of Clara's achievement, but of their survival, their rebirth, their unexpected second chance at life. The medical practice thrived. Patients came from 100 miles away to see the woman doctor who'd passed the examination with the highest score in territorial history. Clara treated women's ailments that they'd never speak of to male doctors delivered babies with a gentleness that eased the terror of childbirth and taught young mothers how to keep their children healthy. Sam worked alongside her, their partnership seamless. He handled the surgical cases that required his steadier hands. Years of ranch work had given Clara strength, but also a tremor from overwork. She managed the diagnostic puzzles, the chronic conditions, the delicate psychology of healing. Dr. Thornton, instead of being threatened by their success, seemed relieved. "I can finally take a day off," he said. First time in 5 years. One day in August, a familiar figure appeared in their clinic, Margaret Bennett Harrison's wife. Clara's hand went to Sam's, automatically bracing for conflict. "Please," Margaret said quickly, "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here as a patient." It turned out Margaret had been suffering from a growth in her breast, something the Philadelphia doctors wanted to remove entirely. She'd come west seeking Clara's opinion, having heard of her reputation. "Why would you trust me?" Clara asked, genuinely puzzled. "After everything with Harrison, because you saved your children against all odds," Margaret said simply. "And because James once told me you had the best diagnostic mind he'd ever encountered. He said you could see patterns others missed." Clara examined Margaret thoroughly, then consulted with Sam. Together, they proposed a different approach, a more limited surgery that might preserve more tissue while still removing the growth. "It's riskier," Sam warned, "but if successful, the recovery would be much better." "I trust you," Margaret said, looking at Clara. "Both of you." The surgery was performed in their clinic with Rose assisting as she'd begun training as a nurse under her mother's guidance. Thomas, now 6 and fully recovered, watched from the doorway until Sam shooed him away. The operation was successful. Margaret recovered in the McKenna home, spending long hours talking with Claire about James, about the past, about forgiveness. "Harrison's changed since our visit here," Margaret admitted one evening. "He saw something in you and your family that shook his certainties. He's been kinder to our own children, less rigid." "People can change," Clara said. "Sam and I are proof of that." Before Margaret left, she pulled Clara aside. "James would be so proud, not just of what you've become, but of the family you've built. Those children are thriving." "They have a good father," Clara said, watching Sam teach Thomas to tie surgical knots on the porch. "They have 2 good parents," Margaret corrected, "and that makes all the difference." As autumn approached, the territory prepared for the Harvest Festival. It would be the first real celebration since the drought, a symbol of survival and renewal. Claire and Sam were chosen to be the honored family recognized for their service to the community. "I don't like being the center of attention," Sam grumbled as Clara adjusted his new suit. "Too bad," she said, kissing his cheek. "Heroes don't get to choose obscurity." "We're not heroes. We're just people who kept trying." "Sometimes that's the same thing." The festival was glorious. The rain had produced a magnificent harvest, and the tables groaned under the weight of food. There was dancing and music, laughter and hope. Thomas won the pie-eating contest, his face covered in blueberry filling. Rose recited Latin poetry to amazed audiences. As the sun set, Sam found himself standing with Dr. Thornton, watching Clara teach a group of young women basic medical techniques. "You know she's going to change everything," Thornton said. "More women will want to become doctors. The medical board will have to adapt." "Good," Sam said. "Medicine needs changing." "You've changed too," Thornton observed. "When you first came here, you were a ghost. Now look at you." Sam considered this. It was true. The man who'd hidden in a bottle, who'd come west to disappear, was gone. In his place stood someone who had learned that healing others could heal yourself, that building a family from broken pieces could create something stronger than what existed before. "Papa Sam," Thomas ran up, grabbing his hand. "Come dance, Mama says you have to dance." Sam let himself be pulled onto the makeshift dance floor, where Clara waited beautiful in her simple blue dress. As the fiddle played, they danced while their children laughed and their community celebrated around them. "No regrets?" Clara asked as they swayed together. "How could I regret the path that led me to you? Even the pain, the losses, even those," Sam said. "Because without them, I wouldn't understand the value of what we have." The music swelled, and other couples joined them on the floor. The Kowalskis, the Morrisons, even the young couple who'd just claimed the plot next to theirs. The community that had nearly died in drought now danced in abundance. Later that night, as they tucked the children into bed, Thomas asked, "Will we always be this happy?" Sam and Clara exchanged glances. How to answer such a question honestly? "We'll always be together," Clara said finally. "And that's a kind of happiness that lasts." Even when bad things happen, Rose asked, older and wiser than her 8 years. "Especially then," Sam said, "because we'll face them together." The children seemed satisfied with this answer. As Sam and Clara stood in the doorway watching them settle into sleep, Sam felt a profound sense of completion, not ending, but wholeness. "We did it," he whispered to Clara. "We actually did it." "Did what?" "Built something unbreakable." Clara leaned into him. "Nothing's unbreakable, Sam." "No," he agreed. "But some things are worth fixing again and again, as many times as it takes." Outside, the prairie wind sang through the grass, and the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. The McKenna family slept peacefully in their home, surrounded by community, protected by love, and healed by the choice to keep choosing each other every day, no matter what came. The drought had tried to destroy them. Harrison had tried to divide them. The past had tried to haunt them. But they had answered every challenge with the same response together, and together they were unstoppable. 10 years later, on a crisp October morning in 1883, Dr. Clara McKenna stood in the doorway of the new Redemption Creek Hospital, a proper building with 12 beds, an operating theater, and a teaching room where she instructed young women who came from across the territory to learn medicine from the legendary Lady Doctor. "Mama, you're going to be late," Rose called from inside. At 18, she had her mother's steady hands and sharp mind already accepted to the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania for the following year. "I'm coming," Clara said, but she lingered another moment, watching the sunrise paint the prairie gold. So much had changed. So much had stayed the same. Sam appeared beside her, his hair more silver than copper now, but his eyes still bright with the purpose she'd helped him rediscover. "Nervous." "For a speech after all we've been through," Clara laughed. "Though I still can't believe they want me to address the Territorial Medical Convention." "Believe it. You've trained 6 women doctors in the last 5 years. You've changed the infant mortality rate for the entire county. You deserve to be heard." Thomas rushed past them, 15 now, and tall as Sam, late for his job at the newspaper where he was learning to set type. "Tell them about the drought," he called over his shoulder. "Tell them how communities survive together." "I will," Clara promised. The convention hall in Topeka was packed. Doctors from across Kansas and beyond had come to hear the woman who'd scored the highest on the territorial medical exam speak about frontier medicine. Clara stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, mostly male skeptical, some openly hostile. "Gentlemen," she began, then paused. "And ladies," she added, nodding to the small cluster of women in the back. "I'm here to talk about healing, not just bodies, but communities. Not just individuals, but families." She told them about the drought, about Thomas's pneumonia, about Sam walking 60 miles for medicine. She told them about neighbors sharing their last water, about a town protecting a family from those who would destroy it. "Medicine," she said, her voice growing stronger, "is not just about what we know. It's about how we serve. It's about seeing each patient not as a case, but as someone's child, parent, spouse. It's about understanding that healing happens in relationship, in community, in the choice to keep trying when trying seems impossible." She spoke about the women who wouldn't see male doctors for female complaints, dying of treatable conditions out of modesty. She spoke about the children lost to preventable diseases because their parents couldn't afford a doctor's fee. "We have a sacred duty," Clara said, meeting the eyes of the skeptics. "Not to our bank accounts or our professional status, but to life itself. And life doesn't care about our certificates or our prejudices. It only cares that we show up skilled and ready without judgment. When she finished, the silence was profound. Then from the back, where the women stood, applause began. It spread slowly, reluctantly, from some, enthusiastically from others, until the entire hall was on its feet. Dr. Thornton, now head of the Territorial Medical Board, stood to speak. When I first met Dr. Clara McKenna, I tried to have her arrested for practicing medicine without a license. It was the greatest mistake of my professional life. She has taught me that healing is both an art and a science, and that sometimes the art matters more. I moved to establish a formal training program for women physicians with Dr. McKenna as its head. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it passed. On the train ride home, Clara leaned against Sam's shoulder, exhausted but exhilarated. Did that really happen? It did. You're going to train an army of women doctors. We are, she corrected. Partners remember. They returned to find Redemption Creek, preparing for a wedding, not their own this time, but Rose's. She'd fallen in love with the young newspaper editor who'd hired Thomas, a serious young man named David, who looked at Rose like she hung the stars. You're too young, Sam had protested when Rose first announced her engagement. I'm the same age Mama was when she married Papa James, Rose had countered. That's different. How, Rose had challenged, and Sam had no good answer. Now, watching Rose in Clara's carefully preserved wedding dress, the one from her marriage to Sam, bought back from the person who'd purchased it during the drought, Sam felt time folding in on itself. She looks like you, he told Clara. She looks like herself, Clara corrected, strong and sure and ready for whatever comes. The wedding was held in the church, now expanded to twice its original size. The whole town attended, including families Claire and Sam had saved over the years. The Kowalski children, healthy and thriving. The Patterson baby, now a sturdy 10-year-old. Dozens of others who owed their lives to the doctors McKenna. Thomas served as his sister's witness, proud and protective. At 15, he towered over most of the guests, but his lungs, though scarred, had held strong. He planned to study journalism and law, to fight with words instead of scalpels, as he put it. During the reception held in the field behind the church, where wildflowers grew in abundance, Sam found himself standing with several of the younger doctors who'd come to study under Clara. How did you do it? One asked. How did you support your wife, becoming more famous than you? Sam looked across the field to where Clara was dancing with Thomas, both of them laughing at some shared joke. Easy, he said. I remembered that her light doesn't diminish mine. It makes mine brighter. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Clara found Sam sitting on the same hillside where they'd once watched storm clouds gather during the drought. Penny for your thoughts. Just thinking about circles, Sam said. How we met in a war, found each other in theft, and built something from the ruins. Any regrets? It was their old question asked periodically through the years. Only one, Sam said. Clara looked at him in surprise. In 10 years, he'd never expressed a regret. I wish my Thomas could see this, could see that I finally learned what he tried to tell me, that you can't save everyone, but you don't stop trying. Clara took his hand. He knows. How can you be sure? Because you passed it on. To our Thomas, to Rose, to every patient you've taught with compassion instead of just clinical detachment. Your brother's wisdom lives in how you practice medicine, how you father our children, how you love. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter dance with her new husband, their son charm the young ladies with his newspaper stories, their community celebrate another milestone in their shared journey. Clara, Sam said suddenly, I have something to tell you. She turned to him, concern flickering across her face. I'm proud of you, not just as a doctor or a mother or a wife. I'm proud of who you are. The woman who stole eggs to save her child and became a healer who saves hundreds. The woman who married a broken drunk and helped him become whole. The woman who faced down drought and disease and prejudice and never stopped fighting. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Sam McKenna, after 10 years, you can still surprise me. Good. I'd hate to become predictable. That night, after the guests had gone home and Rose had left with her new husband for their own homestead just 5 miles away, Sam and Clara stood on their porch with Thomas looking out at the land that had nearly killed them and then given them everything. "Tell me the story," Thomas said. It was his old childhood request, but even at 15, he sometimes still asked. "Which one?" Clara asked, though she knew. "The one about how you stole Papa's eggs." Clara laughed. "I was desperate scared, sure I was about to be shot or arrested." "And then Papa said," Thomas prompted. "You planning to bake a pie or just starving?" Sam finished, and they all laughed at the familiar words. "And then what?" Thomas asked, though he knew every word. "And then," Clara said, pulling both her men close, "we chose each other. Again and again, through everything, we chose each other." "And we always will," Sam added. As they went inside, the first snow of the season began to fall gentle, nourishing nothing like the desperate drought years before. The land was healthy now, the community strong, the hospital thriving. Rose would have children who would grow up knowing that women could be doctors, that men could be partners, that families could be built from any configuration of love and determination. In the years that followed, Clara would train 43 women doctors. Sam would pioneer new surgical techniques adapted for frontier conditions. Thomas would become a renowned journalist and eventually a judge, his damaged lungs never stopping him from speaking truth to power. Rose would have 6 children and become a doctor herself, practicing alongside her mother until Clara's peaceful death at age 78. But that was all to come. On this snowy evening in 1883, the McKenna family was simply together, whole-heeled. They had taken their wounds from war, from loss, from near destruction, and transformed them into wisdom, strength, and an unbreakable bond. The message was simple, carved into the very foundations of their life. Love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice made daily to keep building, even when everything falls apart. It's the decision to see theft as need, as opportunity, as love. It's understanding that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into, and that healing, real healing, happens not in isolation, but in community, in the space between two broken people who decide to become whole together. As Sam would write in his journal that night, the last entry in a volume that had begun with despair and ended with joy. "We were all wounded, we all fell, but we fell together, and in falling, learned to fly." The snow continued to fall, blessing the land that had tested them, the home they had built, the love they had chosen again and again, until choosing became as natural as breathing. And in the morning, they would wake and choose again, because that's what love is, not a single moment of decision, but a lifetime of choosing, building healing together.